On today's Locked On Senators, it's our good friend, TSN analyst and former NHLer, Dave Poulin.
He gets into Ridley Greig coming up to the NHL, what he thinks the Sens should do at the trade deadline, and a very interesting story about the All-Star game in the 80s.
Plus, from one Flyers captain about another, does he think Claude Giroux can reach 1,000 points in his career this season? It's all brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. This is the Locked On Senators podcast. It's your team every day.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm Jake Sanderson, and you're listening to Locked On Senators podcast.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Welcome inside episode 727 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba, alongside Brandon Pillar up in the Blue Mountains. Today is Thursday, February 2nd, and Pilsy, do you know who Fred Penner is yet?
I mean, I'm discovering that. Yeah, apparently, Ross, we missed out on something from our childhood. But yes, a lot of great little nuggets in our Claire Hanna interview, and Fred Penner is one of them.
Great to see that interview doing well. Claire is a bundle of joy. I don't think she has any bad days. Do you?
I don't know. Yeah, she's got a lot of energy, and she seems like a very positive person, and that shines through the screen for sure.
If you still haven't heard it, you can go check out that interview wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, the Senators are on an 11-day break between games. Brady Tkachuk is in Florida getting ready for Saturday's NHL All-Star Game and the festivities that will be going on all weekend long. You can follow the show on Twitter at Sens Central, on Instagram, lockedon.senators. Pilsy, who better to bring on at this time than Dave Poulin? We got into the game in Montreal on Tuesday. He was up in the booth calling it for TSN 2 from the Montreal side of things. And some great insight, not only about the current day Senators and what they should do at the deadline, but I always love the old Pouly stories. This guy played on the same Team Canada as Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux at times, the Rendezvous All-Star Game. So great time to get some old school stories with Pouly.
Yeah, absolutely. Pouly's the best. I think maybe a lot of people maybe underrate him, or they don't kind of appreciate what he brings to the table as much as they really should, because his insight is so good. He's just a genuine person, and he has so much experience. Ross, not only as a player, not only as a coach, he coached in Notre Dame for a long time, but also in front offices. He was a part of the Leafs front office a while back. So he just has a wealth of knowledge that we love talking to him every single time.
Tons of knowledge, tons of experience. And Pilsy, we've noticed on the postcast in the chat as well, we've picked up some Flyers fans along the way wanting to see Claude Giroux succeed. So, of course, they'll have great memories of Poulin being the captain of those Flyers teams back then. And Pouly was actually in a similar situation as Ridley Greig was, because he got to play with his childhood idol in his first NHL game. So, Pilsy, why don't we get to Dave Poulin? Very good 45-minute conversation with Dave Poulin coming up right now on Locked On Senators.
But today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And FanDuel is our new official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. And for a good reason. They're the #1 sportsbook in North America, an official sportsbook of the NFL. And Ross, there are so many fun things you can do on FanDuel. First off, I love that it's an app that's safe, secure, simple to use. Right from your phone, you can live bet, money line, puck line, props, totals, over-unders, whatever you like. They got it there. And you even can put together a couple of bets in the same game for same game parlays to pay out big. But if you're new to FanDuel, even better, guys. For our friends down in the States, you can get $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/LockedOn. And Ross, the Super Bowl is coming up, and I'm so excited for Gronk. Yes, Rob Gronkowski. He's going to be kicking a field goal in the Super Bowl. It's called the Kick of Destiny. We're going to be waiting to hear more about that, but I'm going to be following along with that for sure. And that's all with FanDuel. So football fans, don't miss out. Again, place $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Today's episode is also brought to you by the GLEBE Central Pub. You know we love our friends at the GLEBE Central Pub. You can find them at 779 Bank Street. Pills, you can find them every day at 779 Bank Street, but I hope to see you there on February 17th. The poster is made. The live show is scheduled 4:45 p.m. Eastern on February 17th. Get your shuttle bus tickets now. Don't wait until the last minute. These tickets are going fast, and we need to order more buses. Yes, we've already sold out one bus. The goal is 3. Can we sell out 3 buses and get a convoy going to the CTC? We're not going to stay weeks. We're going to go just for the game and come back, but the convoy will be flying down on the Queen's Way on February 17th. The bus is going to leave at 5:40. Chris Neal's jersey retirement starts at 7. Still wild that that's how far the rink is from downtown, but we will get there in plenty of time for that. The boots will be on the bus ahead of being on the ground at the CTC. Check them out at 779 Bank Street. Get your tickets at GLEBECentralPub.com. Their online store is right there. February 17th, we will see you at the Glebe Central Pub. Go check them out. Great people, tasty food, cold drinks, and an inclusive atmosphere. It doesn't get any better than that. Go check them out. Glebe Central Pub, 779 Bank Street. And make sure you let them know Locked On Senators sent you. All right, here he is. TSN analyst, former NHLer. It's Dave Poulin. All right, we now welcome on a very good friend of the show. It's Dave Poulin, TSN analyst, former NHLer, and 2, maybe 3-time All-Star. We'll get into it, but Pouly, how are you doing today, brother?
Doing great. A little breather here with the All-Star break and a much welcome one, I think, for everybody in the business. And I've covered a couple of All-Star games, and I'm not heading down to Florida for this one. It's a fun weekend to be at. It's a great weekend for the players. There's a lot of factors why it's a great weekend for the players. And it's for the fans in the city that hosts it. I know there's a lot of criticism about the actual event, but think about it as an event and not a game. I mean, that's what it is, right? The days of the games are long past. I played in a couple of them. There were actual games where people hit each other, and there was low scoring events. A couple of funny stories from that as well, which we can get into. But I think it is a great weekend for the host city. It's a great weekend, all the sponsors and everything. And when I'm asked what to do with it, I would put it in the hands of the youngest fans at the NHL office and say, what are we going to see next in the game? And that's what we'll do that weekend. Like, don't worry about an actual game. You know, whatever you can come up with that sells the game and sells fans and makes it fun and makes it enjoyable. It doesn't embarrass the players in any way, but makes it a really fun weekend. Let's go for that. And let's attract new viewers.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, everybody needs to understand it's for the fans, the sponsors, and it's for the people there. So I fully appreciate that. But I think we'll get into the All-Star stuff a little later on because we want to talk about the Ottawa Senators coming on a 4-game win streak heading into the break. Pouly, I want to get your opinion on this. How do the Ottawa Senators players, coaches, how do they keep that momentum going through such a long break? Like, is it easy to stay kind of hungry when you're going on family vacations, you're going to sunny places, then you got to come back in and try to keep that win streak going? What are some things they can do to keep the momentum here?
They actually didn't go on break, Brandon. They're playing a game on the Rideau Canal today. And,
nice.
Yeah, they're playing a collection of local All-Stars because they didn't want to go anywhere. You're exactly right. I did the game in Montreal on Tuesday night, and so I worked that game and saw it firsthand. Great late win. The bigs were the bigs. Hard game to play. And Montreal's been playing very well lately. And sneakily in the last couple of weeks, Montreal had beaten Winnipeg. They'd beaten the Rangers in New York. They'd beaten the Leafs. Those are top teams in the league. And they played a really good game against Boston, losing as well by a goal. And so I think Ottawa knew what they were running into and, hammered them at home 5-0, but it really wasn't a 5-0 game. The numbers were pretty close in that game, and they're getting great goaltending from Anton Forsberg, but a big win on, in every respect for Ottawa. Do you want the break? No, but they were a little banged up as well. So you take the break, you keep the momentum, and part of the growth of a team is learning how to handle things like this. You're throwing a 10-day break. I'm sure everybody took gear home with them. They're going to skate in some manner. They're going to, take care of business, but also relax and enjoy. The reason I like this, guys, is because I think it bodes really well for the next 2.5 months. And when you're around the teams, and I can get down to the locker room and I can be around the teams and be at the morning skates, and both mentally and physically breaking the season into segments, they were at the end of this one. I mean, this is coming off of Christmas and it's 5 weeks and it's emotional. And now it's leading up to the trade deadline. There's another little 3-week run we'll have before the trade deadline. But I think it's a much welcome rest. And because of the way they schedule it, where every team gets 8 or 10 days either before or after the All-Star break, even the guys that are playing in the game, I think it's huge in how they use it. And having maybe you would say, okay, well, early in the year they had a 4-game winning streak and didn't continue it. So maybe you'd say, the way I would spin it if I were managing them, Brandon, is I would say, this is a welcome break because last time it didn't go well. We're going to handle it differently. We're going to get a break physically. We're going to come roaring back into this.
Well, the Sens are undefeated in the Ridley Greig area. Do you know his dad at all from your time I know he's been a Flyer forever.
Just a little bit, and more to compete against. He'd have been a Hartford Whaler when I was a Bruin, a young, hotshot first rounder in Hartford and a big time goal scorer in junior. But I don't know him well. I'm enjoying the play of his son very much. Interesting little tweak there where they sent him down to Belleville but aren't playing him in games.
Yeah, what do you think of
that? When I was asked immediately, Ross, when I was asked, what would you do with him? My first thought was I wouldn't send him back to Belleville. And then I thought, well, you're 20 years old. You've got to at least skate during this time. So maybe this is the best solution of both. It also shows you what they think of Ridley Greig. And in terms of how important he is to them, they're not going to risk him playing in the American League and getting hurt right now. They think is a big part of it. But this keeps him skating, keeps him fresh. He'll get a couple of days off, and then he'll be back to work immediately after the break. So I don't mind it. It's a little, I think, creative in the way you handle a player, a 20-year-old. Do you want a 20-year-old jumping on a private plane with the guys and going out for, maybe not. Maybe it's a better idea to keep him skating and keep him tuned up. I like the way he's fit in. I like the way watching him in exhibition, you're concerned. And I played with a player like him in terms of being a size of him and the tenacity, and that would have been Ronnie Sutter as a 20-year-old, where he threw himself around everywhere and so hard to sustain it physically. And that's what I was worried about with Ridley Greig, but I think he's been remarkably controlled during his 4 games. Looks like he fits right in. He's played a balanced 15-ish minutes. And guess what? He's rejuvenated a couple of guys in Alex DeBrincat and Claude Giroux. You're allowed to be rejuvenated by young guys, by the way. That's okay. And you're seeing it firsthand in the way he's played with those. He looks like he's pretty comfortable, guys.
Yeah, he would have had his first NHL goal on Saturday, but Arbor Jackeye thought, hey, I'm just going to score on my net instead. He was perfectly set up backdoor. Before we move off the Habs, because I know you were up in the booth for that game, there's been a lot of discussion, and we know Habs and Sens fans like to go at it with the Arbor Jackeye, Brady Tkachuk situation. Brady gives him a good run into the boards. Arbor kind of flips the puck nonchalantly, not like he was going full Alfie in the Stanley Cup Finals on him, but he did give him a little flip towards Brady, and Brady gave him a shove. Do you think Brady owes Jackeye a fight in that situation? Because I think for the Sens, it's better for both of them to be on the ice.
No, I don't think he owes him a fight there, and I think it's going to be a battle that we enjoy for the next 10 years. I really do. I've been remarkably impressed with Arbor Jackeye. I just spoke about Ridley Greig and controlling the way he plays. And Jackeye is controlling the way he plays. If I were that good at what he does, and that's handling himself, I'd probably be involved more. But I think he's getting excellent mentorship from within, from Joel Edmondson and David Savard. And also from Stefan Robidoux, who's the defense coach there. I think he's getting, he's a good player, guys. He's just a flat out good player. When he came in as a free agent last year in training camp, he stood out in the games. And I thought, this kid wasn't even drafted. And I called Stevie Stalos in Hamilton, and Stevie had traded for him from Kitchener and been able to get him. And he thought of the championship run they had, the Memorial Cup. And he said, Pouly, this kid can play. And, he's been on the power play at times. I think he's at 5 or 6 goals, but he's comfortable in his stick position. That's a really young group. Some nights there were 5 rookies in that lineup. And the one that has already separated himself on a Jake Sanderson-like platform is Caden Gooley. And he's hurt right now, but he's really good, guys. And that's a defense that Montreal is going to build. They're going to have to choose, actually, which of the 5 they're going to move forward with. I think they're going to have to choose, because you've still got Matheson, you've still got Edmondson, who I could see them moving at the deadline, and Savard, who I think they move next year at the deadline because he has 2 years left on his deal. That's the way I would. My GM hat, just wait, I'll put my GM hat on and make some decisions here. But I think that was well played by both sides, actually. And, what Brady is not used to having to deal with is someone physically the same size as him.
Yeah.
And I think they're almost similar. Jack-Eye might be a little heavier. And, Brady just flat out doesn't deal with that very often. And that, to the way he handles the front of the net physically, nobody can handle him. And all of a sudden he's seeing a kid who's not only physically capable of handling him, but younger than him.
Yep.
And, it's not like a man strength 30-year-old who's doing it.
Yeah.
I will say Jack-Eye was the one picking himself up off the mat there in the corner. But no, the only thing that kind of bothered me about it was people calling Brady a coward for not dropping him. It's like, you just gave up a goal to make it 3-2. You're up a goal going into the third period. Why are you going to give a depth defenseman on the other side any sort of momentum going into the corner? This is the guy who fought Shea Weber when he was 20 years old. He's not scared of fighting anybody, but I wanted to get that in there as well. But you're right.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ross.
And I mean, there were some stats thrown my way that did open my eyes. Not like the Sens decor is the most mobile beyond Chabot and Sanderson, but Jack-Eye would be 3rd in points among Sens defensemen. So you do have to kind of tip your hat to a guy who was undrafted, no doubt. Pilsy, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, Ross and I talk about this all the time. We don't like Arbor Jack-Eye because he plays for the Habs, but if he was on the Sens, we would probably really like him.
We got our own coming, though. Hey, Pouly, we got the K-Train, Tyler Clevin coming at least in the next couple of years.
He's an interesting element. He really is. And, that points back to that, the draft and develop model. And it's not the same for everyone. And with Jake Sanderson coming in, guys, and I still have a lot of contacts, having worked as long as I did in the NCAA ranks.
Yeah.
And the comparisons I was told to make with Jake Sanderson were 2 other players who had played 2 years of college hockey, and that was Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes. Now, different in terms of their offensive skill set, I would say, but Sanderson defensively, guys, is really good. Like, he is a top defender in the National League right now. He's 20 years old. He's long. He skates extremely well. He can get up and go. He can walk along the blue line. He does so many things well. And the interesting part for me about Clevin is he's a different element. He's a bigger, more physical guy, albeit a left shot. I love it if he was a right shot. I think you'd be a little bit happier. But
hey, he's going to get to Belleville. Troy Mann's going to have a bunch of right-handed sticks for him, in the locker room.
That's right. Hey, I played with a couple guys that were left shots who played the right side impeccably well. And it was Brad McCrimmon, the dear departed Brad McCrimmon. And a guy named Ray Bork played the offside pretty well too, and preferred it, absolutely, the having a stick in the middle of the ice and being able to pivot and lateral that way. So, we'll see what happens. But another good element, and I use that word element in terms of a different skill set than what a lot of the Ottawa defenders are right now.
What do you make of the evolution of Eric Brandstrom? Talking about guys who maybe have played better on their offside, but for me, the strangest thing is a highly touted offensive defenseman has now turned into like a pretty good shutdown defenseman despite being 5'11". What do you make of where he fits in long-term in Ottawa?
Just looked at those numbers recently, and the 2-goal part of it, 2 goals, I believe he has.
No,
right?
0
in his career. At least 2 goals in his career.
2 in
Yes.
his career. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were both on Calgary in the COVID year. One of them was from his own blue line.
Yeah.
Mystifying to me. Mystifying 2 goals, because you looked at him as an offensive player. And I don't want to say I had 2 goals in my first game and then moved on from there, but but I did. but because you see him up ice when he's at his best, you see him up ice, and even I think 30 assists in his careers in that range. And it appears just by accident you would have more than that.
Yeah.
You know, just passing to elite players. You'd have, I mean, Sanderson's got 20 points this year, maybe 21. And so I don't know. He's confused me. I knew how highly touted he was coming in, and he's still a young guy. And I still always go back to Randy Carlisle, who I worked with, who said 300 games, guys, 300 games before you decide on an NHL defenseman and who he is and what he is and whether he can play or not. So there's still a little leeway there, but it has been a challenge for him. And on that, if he were to be a left defenseman now with Chabot and Sanderson, you know, where does he fit in? And you've got to have different elements. You can have a guy like that in your defense core. I don't think you can have more than one. And, you know, when they had both he and Mete in the same lineup, that doesn't work for me, just in terms of trying to handle guys in front of the net, handle a Brady Tkachuk in front of the net. It's so hard to do. But, you know, we'll see what happens. It's still, by not moving forward under defenseman, what it's done is give guys like Brandstrom even more of an opportunity. So at least when you make a decision on him, you're going to have a full body of work. He's had an opportunity. You cannot look at the player and say he hasn't had an opportunity. He's had an opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even parts of later seasons when Thomas Chabot was out, Eric Brandstrom was a top pair defenseman playing on the top power play unit and still wasn't able to kind of do what Sens fans had hoped. I want to get back to Ridley Greig. I want to ask you about this. Ridley Greig comes into the NHL, makes his debut on a second line with Alex DeBrincat and Claude Giroux. No pressure there. That's some 2 good players to play with. But were you ever in a situation where you were the young guy playing on a line with top guys, or the reverse, where you were in Claude Giroux's case and you had a young guy play with you? Like, what's the dynamic there?
Well, Pouly, I just looked it up.
Both.
You scored 2 goals in your first game. You scored 4 minutes into your first game. Daryl Sittler got an assist on it, so I'd imagine he might have been one of those guys.
That would have been one of those guys. A guy
Definitely.
Who's a boyhood idol of yours growing up, Brendan.
Exactly.
Who, by the way, in a totally different story for a different day, when you were in high school, you went over and sat on his driveway waiting for them to come back from the Islanders game.
Wow.
When they beat the Islanders in the playoffs in 78, literally 3 buddies of mine and I were sitting on Daryl Sittler's driveway when the whole team came back to his house.
So you related this then with Ridley.
Sid and I got a good laugh out of that in future years. The way I broke the story to him after that night after the first game when he'd assisted on my first goal, and because I joined the team from Europe, guys, I didn't know one single player on that team, right? Because I'd never been to training camp. So I walk in like bag over my shoulder, sticks to the front door of Maple Leaf Gardens, didn't even know there was a back door or player's entrance. And, you know, and assists on my first goal. And so that night, where do you sit on the plane, guys? Like what you get on the plane, you don't know where to sit. Yeah. We're flying home right after the game. And so I walked down and there was an aisle seat across from Daryl that was open. I'm like, okay, at least I know who that is. I didn't even know who a lot of the guys were. And I sat down across from him, and then I'm kind of working up my nerve, and I lean across and said, "Did you not know we were going to be teammates?" And he looks at me and goes, "No, what do you mean?" So I told him the story about 5 years before that when I was in high school.
That's awesome.
And I came in when sitting on his front lawn. He laughed. He tells that story all the time.
Love it.
Yes, I do know what it's like, Brandon, to play with, you know, someone that you'd idolize growing up. And then on the other side of it, I had young guys that I played with in later years. Stephen Hines would have been one in Boston when he came back from the Olympics in 92. I had him on my line. Steve Konowalchuk, I roomed with in Washington. I think he was 19 years old at the time, you know, and I would have been 36. So, yeah, both sides of it I've been on, and very respectful of both sides of it. But it's, what Claude Giroux has done for the team as a whole this year, and then sort of a new burst of energy with Ridley Greig. And not that, there was a little flattening of his game, I think, just because he's played so well. But boy, oh boy, and then you rip off 7 points in 3 games and you're the player of the week playing with a 20-year-old centerman who, was 5 years old when you broke into the league, or whatever it was, 4 years old when you broke in the league. I think it refreshes guys. I do. Ridley Greig walk into the locker room, and by the way, you're always welcome when you can help. And when you join a team halfway through a year or late in the year, and the recognition is there from the veterans that you can help them, there's an acceptance that's immediate. It's different from training camp when everyone's competing for jobs and, everyone's trying to hammer through things. But there's a realization. He comes in and he's filling a spot. It lets so many things happen. It lets Shane Pinto bump down. Matthew Joseph and Tyler Mott come back. It just rearranges your lineup. You're bringing 3 or 4 different guys in the lineup and lets you restructure what the lines were. And a little shout out to the coaching staff here, because I know they've taken a lot of heat through various things over the course of the year, but rearranging the lines and sort of redistributing Drake Batherson down was significant at the start of this 4-game run. And when Ridley Greig came in, they rebalanced the lines, and they could have said, well, Brady's having a great year and Claude's having a great year, so we're not going to change things, but they didn't, and they were willing to redistribute. And when you get players of that caliber, it's easier to do. It's easier to say, can Giroux figure out DeBrincat and Greig? Of course he can, better players, but not everybody fits with everybody. So the willingness to try something different, I think the coaching staff should be recognized for that.
We can't have a Philadelphia Flyers captain on without discussing another. Claude Giroux, I had the take going into the season that he was going to hit 1,000 points this year for his career. He needed 77. Now there's 32 games left, and he's 29 points away. Does he get there this year, Pouly? 29 points in the next 32 games.
Yes.
Yes.
There we go. Yep.
Does he get there scoring his career high number in goals?
Whoa, he's at 20 right now. The career high is 34.
Mm-hmm. Ooh.
I say he hits 30. That's as far as I'm willing to go on that one.
The amazing thing is, with 300 plus goals, he's only hit 30 once in his career.
Yeah,
that's
it is
amazing.
Crazy. And he's put up massive points. Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah.
But amazing to me that he's only had 130 goal a year. And so maybe rethinking a little bit of his game here and his role, and visualizing himself more as a shooter than the pass first guy he's always been in his career.
I love watching him play. I didn't appreciate him enough when he was in Philly. Like, you heard about him, he was good, 100-point seasons, but like, he gives me Alfie vibes. Like, he's that competitive in the corner guy who can control a line from the wing, which you just don't see as often.
Watch his defensive stick coming back through the neutral zone. Yep. Very underappreciated. And his ability to pick off passes and his willingness.
That's how he scored that goal in Toronto, that 6th goal.
Exactly.
Great play in the neutral zone, and then he's all alone. Like, not only does he have the defensive awareness to do that in the neutral zone, but then he pulls off one of the most creative offensive moves and goes bar down on the goalie to finish it off. Like, just incredible.
Looked pretty good.
Yep.
No, not bad. Well, the one that jumps out to me, jumps literally, the one against Washington, where it's a breakout pass and he goes full shortstop, just full dive on the ice, stops the puck, gets up, puts it on Timmy's stick, and he goes in and buries. Have you thought that Tim Stützle's even exceeded expectations now? Because what this guy's doing, I know you saw him go for 4 points on Tuesday night. Like, this guy at the drop of a dime can just light up the scoreboard.
The oldest adage when somebody gets hurt in sport is what an opportunity is for somebody else. And you don't know if that's going to play out. It's more coach speak than it is, or player speak, who's ruining the fact that they've lost somebody. But when Josh Norris went out in the move to center for Tim Stützle, now we're assuming because it's looked so good that it would have happened at some point, but we don't know when. And it may not have accelerated the excellence that we're seeing at the age we're seeing it at as quickly. He's really good, guys, flat out. He's really good. And he's explosive. He's dynamic. He's confident. but I think you're seeing, humble's not the right word. You're seeing a little more roundedness to his game coming in, where he is more than willing, and you love a centerman who is balanced between shoot first and pass first. Pinto he's not shy at all to shoot the puck. Ridley Greig, you can't have 8 shots in your first NHL game and be shy to shoot the puck.
Yeah.
But most often when you're in the middle, you think of yourself more as a distributor. And I played with 2 guys a large part of my career in Philadelphia with Brian Propp and Tim Kerr. I never considered myself a goal scorer, ever. If I was passing, Timmy, first of all, commanded the puck. And the best players command it. When you're out there, you think you're supposed to give it to them. Brian Propp demanded it. He was open every second I ever had the puck in my life. Like, I don't ever remember him not coming back to the bench and telling me, I was open there. Yep. Well, you were on the ice. So when you're on the ice, you tell me you're open anyway. So I knew you were on the ice. So I knew you were open. But the balance between those two things is, I think, where Stützle's arrived at a very early age. And think of the game-winning goal in Montreal. That puck wasn't on his stick for a split second before it was on Brady's stick. Mm-hmm. And that's a left shot passing to the left wing. And so you just think about that, and you think about the ability to do that and the willingness to do that. And he's creative, he's smart, he can shoot the puck. The upside of Timmy Stützle is going to be fun to watch, guys.
Hope you're enjoying our chat with Pouly. We'll get right back to it. But first, a word from our friends at Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. Have you tried the Built Bar Puffs yet? It's a protein-infused marshmallow. And guess what? New flavor alert. Ready? It's delicious. It's indulgent. It's cookie dough. Covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to this new flavor. Chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course 100% real chocolate on the outside. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy. Only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein within them. So run, don't walk to Built.com and snag a box for you and the family. It's the perfect treat whether you're packing your kids' lunch on the way to school or if you are out and about all day. We know you live a busy life. Don't sacrifice your nutrition with your busy lifestyle. Just like all Built Bars, the new cookie dough chunk puffs, we love how they're 100% covered in chocolate. That means they're healthy, but they're also tasty. What's great about Built is that all their bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. You're going to love it, so check it out, BuiltBar.com, Built.com. Use promo code LOCKEDON15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. They know you'll love it. They know you'll be back, so check them out, LOCKEDON15, 15% off your next order at Built.com. All right, now back to our interview with Dave Poulin.
Now, we teased it at the start of this interview, and I want to get to it because it's really interesting to me. Your all-star experiences, and Ross said you're in 2 all-star games, technically 3. What's the story there? What's the story with the Rendezvous all-star experience in the 80s?
Well, the 2 regular ones were 86 and 88.
Yeah.
So 86 was my first one in Hartford. And guys, the first time you hear you're going to be an NHL all-star, like, I'm an undrafted free agent and, come in and things go so well in Philadelphia right out of the gate. And I think I was there as much because I was the captain of one of the best teams in the league. And I think it was a little nod to, I had good numbers early in my career, but I think that the first all-star recognition came from being the captain of a team that had been in the Stanley Cup Finals, the youngest team in pro sports. Yep. And that's pretty cool. And, if I were going to say, pick a Boston Bruin this year that's an NHL All-Star, well, everybody would say, well, it's got to be Pasternak. The captain of that team is a guy that could go to the All-Star game every year for me in Patrice Bergeron. Mm-hmm. Like, who's the captain of that team that's one of the best teams in recent history in the NHL? And so that was my first year. And Brandon, to first of all, to be named, and then the build up to it. You walk in that locker room for the first time, you see your jerseys hanging there, and no one else was number 20 that was more senior than me, so I got to wear my own number.
Nice.
And you're looking at your number and your name on it, in your stall with the NHL plaque. And then you kind of take a quick look around at the other jerseys and you're like, Brian Trottier, Mike Bossy, Larry Robinson, Peter Stastny, Matt Snaslin, Raymond Bourque. And you're like, are you kidding me right now? Like, it's crazy. And so there's so much pride involved. And that was one of the last games where it was a game. And Wendell Clark was still a member of the Western Conference back then with Toronto, and he's a rookie. In the first period, he ran Mario, like ran him. And as teammates didn't know what to do because you don't, I guess there's going to be a fight in an all-star game, but that's the type of game it was. And then I played in 88 in St. Louis, and that was the 6-5 game. I think Mario had 5 or 6 points. Matt Snaslin had 5 or 6 points playing together. And you were thinking, what if those two ever played together? Those are the types of things in all-star games that are pretty cool to watch. But in 87, there was no NHL all-star game. They tried to do something different. And they picked one team, any nationality from the NHL, and played 2 games against the Russian Red Army team during the Quebec Winter Carnival. So the games were Wednesday and Friday. And it was a really festive week. I mean, there were, concerts and so it was a little bit political, setting up the Canada Cup the following summer. Yeah. But that weekend, guys, there's no way I'm making that team. Like, I'd been an all-star, but they're going to pick one team from the NHL. Come on. I mean, I'm not one of the best 20 players in the NHL. And so we had planned, my twins had been born the previous October, and they had some long health issues. And so we were planning the christening for that weekend. Of course we were. We had a full week or 10 days off. And then all of a sudden I get word that I'm going to make this team. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I've got 100 people coming to Philadelphia for a christening.
Oh, no.
And how is this going to work? And Ed Snyder, one of the greatest owners in the history of pro sports in Philadelphia, stepped in and said, don't worry about it. You've got my plane to fly up to Quebec after the christening. And by the way, where's my invitation? And
wow.
He and his wife, Martha, pulled up in front of the house.
Nice.
And joined us for the christening of my twins. And so
wow.
Pretty cool on all fronts. And then afterwards, I jetted up to Quebec City the next morning on Mr. Snyder's plane and joined that team. And a couple of cool things. That night, there were so many events at the Coliseum that we couldn't skate at the Coliseum. And so that night, we had our first practice as a group. Guys had flown in Monday because a lot of guys had played Saturday. And that was sort of the prelude to what's happening right now with a full 10 days off for the entire NHL. And so we had to practice at a different rink. It was a snowstorm. And when we dressed at the Coliseum, so here's one of the great teams ever put together. Gretz, Mario, Raymond Bourque, Paul Coffey, everybody stick over the shoulder, skates on the stick, snowing out, traipsing through the snow to go to the practice. It was very cool.
Yeah.
So during practice, they called together 3 of us at the start of practice. And it was Kevin Dineen, myself, and Dale Howardchuk.
Okay.
And they said, okay, Dave, we're going to move you to the left wing. And you and Kevin, your responsibilities are pretty clear. You're playing against Krutov, Larionov, and Makarov, Fetisov, and Katsatanov, one of the greatest 5 groups of players ever put together.
Yeah.
At that point, guys, I think they had been together for 16 years as a line. And they were 12. If they were 28 at that point, they were 12 when they were put together. Larionov was 10. And you talk about amazing.
Yeah. And you're getting moved to the wing.
I'm getting moved to the wing.
Yeah.
But we're both kind of looking at Howardchuk and saying, okay, next part of the story. And they said, and if we ever do get the puck away from them, we're going to put the best possession guy in the NHL, Dale Howardchuk, with you guys, because you've got to figure out a way to keep the puck. And, I knew how good Dale Howardchuk was. I didn't know how good Dale Howardchuk was. Guys, he was so amazing through that stretch. And the first game, we scored 2 of the 4 goals. And we shut down that line. And every time we got the puck moved, Kevin and I would just look for Dale Howardchuk. It was like, okay, here you go, Dale. And just it was interesting that much thought went into a mid-season all-star event,
Yeah.
that there were actually people thinking about how to put this team together. Now, any nationality, don't forget we had Gretz and Curry,
Yeah,
which is rare to have players like that. And it was an interesting look at the leadership, because you had Messier and Gretz in the same locker room, so I get to watch that and see the dynamics of that. And the captains in the locker room sitting beside Dougie Wilson, thinking, okay, this is pretty cool too. And it was a really, really fun event. And we ended up splitting the series. We won Wednesday and they won on Friday. And it was a coming out party for Valerie Kaminsky, who had a hat trick on Friday night in that second game. And I can remember in the second game, Dougie Wilson had kind of warned me. He said, "You've never been in a locker room with Messier and Gretzky, have you?" And I said, "No." He said, "Just watch the dynamics." And we were down in the first period, and after the first intermission, Dougie's elbowing me. He said, "Watch this." And so Gretz came in, and he went right to Gretz, right up to his face in the locker room, and said, "Need a little magic here, Gretz. Need a little magic." And he was getting closer to him, and we were all moving back like, "Oh, man."
Yeah, this could get heated. Yeah.
Gretz went out in the second period and was unbelievable. I think he had 3 assists. And you're watching the dynamics of two of the great players to ever play the game and the balance of what happened. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I mean, that's a big part of the All-Star game too. I mentioned it's for the fans and sponsors and stuff, but a guy like Brady Tkachuk going, you're going to get to be in a locker room with a lot of really good players. And it's just about having fun now these days. It's not so much about the competitiveness of the game. What are some of the things that you like that the NHL is trying to do with the All-Star game here? Because the thing I'll always kind of tip my hat to is they're trying different things. I think that's what needs to be recognized here.
Don't think about it as a game. Think about it as showing the skills. Mm-hmm. And that's what they're trying to find ways to do. And that's where it goes to youth. And, you will see these little film clips, guys, of 8-year-olds and 6-year-olds, with wraparounds and lacrosse style goals and some of the things they can do. And that's our audience. That's our next group of players. So think of ways to make it creative. And a little flashback to 86, they approached that 86 group, both sides of the All-Star game, and said, "We're going to try something called a skills competition." And Brian Chachi brought it up with our group, and the guy said, "Nope."
What? Wow.
No, we're not doing a skills competition at an All-Star game. We're not. That was in 86. So look at how far it's come and some of the things they try now and they're open to now. So it's for the local city. It's for the future of the game. Be as creative as you want to be with it. It's not a game per se. It's simply not. Don't look at it as a game. Look at it as a whole bunch of individual skill sets. Sometimes there are 3 players on the ice. Sometimes there's not. And just take how skilled these players are and take that from it. To me, it's for the next generation, Brandon. It just is. It's not for old school hockey guys.
But man,
and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, 100%. Sponsors, kids, that's what it's all about. In 2012, though, when it was in Ottawa, I had the opportunity to go to the fantasy draft that they did where they all picked players. And it was like a rowdy atmosphere. It was at the casino. Like, I want to at least bring back that. I thought that was kind of fun. But you're right.
Well, things like that may be revisited. And I'd be open to anything. But I would put a team together of my youngest, most creative people. And they might not be from the creative department. There might be a couple of guys from the finance department in there, but anybody that's creative and the way they think about the game and they've got ideas for the All-Star weekend, bring them forward. I don't think you could ever recreate what we did in 87 with that rendezvous experience, but it was a cool event. I mean, it was a really cool event.
Yeah, a lot of people forget that Dave Poulin was tied for 4th in scoring in that event, behind only Wayne Gretzky, Valerie Kamensky, Kumutov, and a guy named Mario Lemieux. I can pronounce that one right. I'll tell you that one for free. Pouly, second half of the season, the unofficial second half. We know guys are past 41 games. Who's your cup final right now? Who are you think's leading the way in the East and West?
I have to do this at the start of the year. I don't think we've done it for mid-season yet at TSN, but I have to do it at the start of the season. Yeah, exclusive. Wow. It's okay. So you're putting me on the spot here and I can answer this.
The Sens are on a 4-game win streak too, just so you know.
Yeah, keep it in mind.
Yeah, keep that in mind.
Going Tampa Bay Lightning in the East, guys. Going Tampa Bay back to the finals for the 4th straight time and maybe finding a way to do it again. I think the West is wide open. man, I think the West is wide open. I really do. You know, the Mark Stone news really hurts Vegas. He's such a glue guy. He's a glue guy. He makes everybody in the ice better every time he's on the ice.
Yep.
So they'll miss him. I don't know that they have the goaltending. Maybe Winnipeg is a sleeper. We keep waiting for Colorado to get healthy, and I think they can. But don't forget, they don't have the same goaltender that won the Cup last year. They're different in net, and that could factor in. I don't count Colorado out yet. I still get to see whether they're going to be healthy. Health is such a factor. And maybe there's a dark horse that does come in there, and maybe that dark horse is a very well-coached Dallas Stars team.
True.
Maybe the Winnipeg Jets sneak in there. And, you know, they've had, I like their top six is as good as any top six in the league, guys. It just is. And they've got a goaltender that can win. And a goaltender. And I know other teams have tandems, whatever that may be. They've got a goaltender that can win the Cup. And
I just think that first spot in the Central is going to be so crucial. I know it's a 1-point battle right now between Dallas and Winnipeg, but you got to think Colorado is going to make their move. I mean, 7 wins now, and they're climbing a little bit. But I don't think they're going to have it in them to get up to 1 and 2. They're just too far.
The other thing, Ross, is if they do get just in the playoffs, they got some guys with low mileage this year, man. Landeskog hasn't played.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you're going to inject guys back into the lineup with low mileage. I always feared teams with low mileage guys, you know, and then the other thing with the teams we're talking about is the pedigree of winning is there. Boston's a funny story, guys, because I wrote an article for the Star last week. And when I started to pen it, they had 5 losses. And so you're comparing them to teams, you know, that the greatest teams of all time, Montreal with 8 losses in 76, 77, and in that stretch, and, you know, single digit losses. And so I said to my editor, I said, you know, I'm still a pretty good defensive player because I was able to take the Boston Bruins off the rails just by writing an article about them, and they lost 3 games in a row. So I've still got it. I haven't lost it.
There we go.
I love it. Pilsy, you got a last one for Pouly?
Last one for me is the Senators are in such a weird spot. We call it the mushy middle. They're not terrible enough to be tanking yet. They're not exactly Cup contenders either. What do you do if you're Pierre Dorion going into this trade deadline, which is coming up pretty quickly here, Pouly?
You push like you would push to make your team better. And I'll give you an example of that. You know, last year at the trade deadline, the Boston Bruins made a significant trade for a defenseman. Significant. And it took a full year to carry its value, and that's Hampus Lindholm.
Big time.
And they gave up assets, and they, you know, so I think you're trying to make this team better for the long run, and you're still trying to look for deals, and that's a trade. That's not a free agent. Now, he was a potentially unrestricted free agent, and you know, you were able to ink him to a long-term deal. That's part of what I would be talking about. But I'd be looking to make my hockey club better in exactly that fashion. And if that deal happens before the trade deadline, it may not affect the rest of this year in the manner you want it to make the playoffs, but it's a long-term situation. And I think you're still trying to add that type of player to this defense core. And you're pushing. You're not in any way thinking about Connor Bedard at this point.
No.
You're thinking about playing and winning, and you're thinking about the last month, the season going in every single night thinking we've still got a shot at this. And, you know, all of a sudden now it's 6 points, but you don't even look at that right now. You look, let's just win our games. Yep. We've done this before. We've won 4 games in a row and haven't come out of it well. Let's just win our games. Let's chip away. Break the season into little segments. The next segment is now to the trade deadline. That's your natural segment. It's 3 weeks. And so go out and play 3 great weeks of hockey. Let your management team worry about what they're doing. Don't worry about that. And then maybe in the second half of that, after the trade deadline, you might work to get some young kids in that bottom 6. You might get a Sokolov up here. You might get, you know, somebody else up here who's had a cup of coffee, and say, you know, how much can they help and contribute? a little bit more of the young defenseman through that second half, but do it in the context of winning, just as you do with Jacob Bernard-Docker, do it in the context of winning the game. So I think you can do both. I think you can compete hard and still build towards the future, just as the type of deal that I mentioned.
I like that, Pouly. Final question for me then. We appreciate your time. Always great insight and great to catch up with you once again. But when it comes to that and you're moving in a direction of a little bit of youth and to see what you have, especially JBD, Lassie Thompson, these guys have been drafted 4 or 5 years now. It's like, what are you at the NHL level? Does it send the wrong message if you sell off these pending free agents? Like if you're able to get a late round pick for a Nick Holden, a Travis Hamonic, an Austin Watson, a Tyler Mott, like, does that send the wrong message to the guys who are in it long term that, hey, like we're tearing this down again somewhat? Like I want to grow with these players. Or is it the right move for a long-term perspective because you're giving these opportunities to guys who could be more valuable in those roles going forward?
I believe it's the right move. I do. If you get an opportunity to strengthen, and unless, they're going to be a part of the future as well. You still look at some of the names you mentioned and still say they could be a part of the third or fourth lines next year. They could be a part of the sixth pairing, fifth or sixth defenseman, or seventh defenseman. Mm-hmm. If you were to push one of the names you talk about, a D to a 7 role next year, Buddy played a valuable mentorship role. You can plug him into shorthanded situations, like a Nick Holden type of player where, it's at a perfect 7 and you want him to be a part of the organization and you don't believe the value he brings back this year will outweigh that. And, because there are such things as perfect 7s and 8s too in a higher caliber team. There just are.
The only problem
some of the guys.
Sometimes the Sens have had multiple, like when they moved out Gabranson, Coburn, and Josh Brown, and they got 2 6th and a conditional 7th for them at the deadline.
Right, but now look at some of the picks that they've had, and and look at a Cole Reinhardt and say, okay, well, you know what, you may have landed somebody there. So, you can't dismiss those picks. You've got to be part of it, but you can also get into a frame where you can't have too many picks, guys. If you have picks of multiple 12 or 13 draft picks combined, you're going to run out of space. And in terms of protecting guys on waivers and all those different types of things and just opportunity. And so you've always got to stagger that. There can be something as too many draft picks, and because you're just hedging your bets essentially, worry about the ones that you're drafting and developing those ones.
I love that you ended off with that because Pilsy and I have been preaching, hey, at some point you got to make a quantity for quality type trade and get some value back for all of these draft picks that you've accumulated. And that's where good drafting comes in, right? Because then these players have more value as prospects and people than they did as just we'll select somebody in whatever round. But hey, we always appreciate you, Pouly. Make sure everyone checks out not only your great work on TSN as an analyst, we're still waiting, and you got a couple Sens games coming up, right?
I do. I've got a couple coming up, maybe 3 or 4 in the latter part of this year. And I will have some Sens panels as well. Awesome. Besides color, I'll have some of those spiced in there as well. And I always enjoy working with that group. That's a different team. It's in terms of on and off the ice, it's a different team. And, I've got some great teammates that I work with, producers and directors, and that Ottawa group's a really fun group to work with.
That's awesome. Well, we're looking forward to that. And make sure everyone, as Pouly mentioned, he writes in the Toronto Star every week. And as you can tell from his background, an avid reader as well. Pouly, really appreciate your time, brother. We'll do it again down the road.
Have a great day, guys.
Pilsy, another great show in the books. Thank you to Dave Poulin for joining us. We can't let it be so long since the next time we have Dave Poulin on the show. But enjoy the next 24 hours. Still no Sens hockey, but every 24 hours is a day closer. We do have some great topics lined up for next week. I tweeted out today at Sens Central the wild card stand, just for fun. I just tweeted it out, Pilsy. Don't blame me. Just facts. They're 6 points out, okay? There's teams in between. They're 6 points out. And somebody showed me, I think it was our good friend Rav, the Murderer's Row that's coming in.
It's tough. Yeah.
4 back-to-backs in February. Oh, they're going to come fast and furious. So enjoy this break on a high while you can. because reality might come crashing in sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, that's for sure. But Ross, there is Belleville Senators hockey going on, as it is a big game up against the Rochester Americans tonight. And I believe, they're doing 80s retro night. I mean, that's fitting for Pouly on our pod, talking about playing through the 80s. So I'm probably going to watch this game, Ross, as there's no Sens game, no NHL hockey. So I'll probably tune in, see how the boys down in Belleville are doing tonight.
We will get your take on that game tomorrow. Mark Mathot also going to join us. We'll get his thoughts. The last time we had him on, he was cautiously optimistic, and the roller coaster's gone all the way down and all the way up since then. So we'll see where Meth's at with the team. We'll also see what's bugging him right now. We'll try to get under his skin a little bit. We always know that's fun. But again, thank you very much, not only to Dave Poulin, but Claire Hanna yesterday. We really appreciate everyone for giving us their time, and hope you enjoy it as well. Let us know in the comments if there's anyone else you particularly would like to hear. I know our good friend Hot Lunch wants Parker Kelly, his homeboy, on the show. I've reached out to the Sens, but we also know the players are on vacation, so it's not going to happen soon, but we'd love to have Parker Kelly, especially after that great story that Claire Hanna told about him yesterday. So lots of great content coming up here. The Sens, again, 10 days now until they host the Edmonton Oilers. Pilsy, last point there. We'll get into the schedule and everything coming up. Dude, the Islanders play 4 games by the time the Sens play next Saturday, because their bye week or whatever is before. Dude, they're going to be at 58. They're going to have 8 more games played than Ottawa.
8?
8. They're already at 53. Well, sorry, because Ottawa actually plays in the afternoon and they play. So 7. 7
That's
will be
crazy. You love having games in hand, though. You love having those games in hand. It gives you a glimmer of hope.
Yes, hope is eternal. All right, for today we say goodbye. For Brandon Pillar, I'm Ross Levitan. Get your tickets to the February 17th live show. This has been the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.